All right, welcome to the Annie Tunes In podcast. I want to hear first kind of about what you do and what you are focusing on with your business.
Hey, Annie, thanks for having me. Just for the record, my name is Baruch Halevi. Nobody can say it, so I end up as B. So feel free to call me B. So I have a company called Soul Centered, which I established a few years back here in Denver, Colorado, where I'm recording. And Soul Centered is a center for spirituality, meaning, healing. My wife is a healer, and I'm a therapist and a guide. And so my sort of brand underneath that is maybe you can see behind me, the Defiant Spirit. And I really work with individuals and organizations and companies to find deeper meaning, greater purpose in their individual and corporate lives. And I have some different tools. I'm sure we'll talk about how I do that and why I do that, but that's sort of the overview of what I do.
Yes. So the other day you made me take a quiz, like a personality quiz. So
Yeah.
tell me kind of what that shows you and what the purpose is behind taking that.
Yeah, so I have two major sort of drivers in my life professionally. One is called the Enneagram, which is what you're referring to, oftentimes thought of as a personality test, though it's much more. It's at ancient, deep roots, but it is used as a personality typing test. And the reason why I use that is because of my other passion and pursuit, which is I'm a logotherapist, and logos means meaning. And it's the work of a man named Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl is well known for his book, Man's Search for Meaning, but he was a Holocaust survivor. He created this entire school of psychotherapy to help people find meaning in the most difficult of circumstances. And so, that's my why. I help people find that meaning and that purpose, but the how, that's not so easy to do. I mean, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. And what I found years ago is the Enneagram is a sophisticated system to help you figure out where you've lost your meaning, lost your purpose, and how to get back on track. And so, I sent you a pretty obviously in-depth set of questions,
Mhm.
and it came back, you answered them, and Ennea means 9. So it gave me the 9 fundamental kind of personalities or ways we move through the world. You rank ordered them. And as you defaulted, may I share your Enneagram type
Yeah,
with the
of
world?
course.
So your core type, as I would call it, you have all of these energies in you, but your core type is an Enneagram 7, and that's the enthusiast, that's the visionary. Just go look at all your websites, right? Clearly, you have embodied that. And so, what I would do is I would utilize the information that I have about the Enneagram and the data that I have from you. And we would work together on figuring out where you've sort of lost that meaning, that purpose, how you've gone onto autopilot, where you go when you're unconscious, and how to get back to what I call your responsible self, your response able. You're able to respond to the world. And so that's how I use the Enneagram.
Interesting. So, how is because when people are coming to you, they're kind of looking for some type of therapy. So, how is your therapy different from like if someone was just hiring a regular therapist to help them through things?
Sure. So for about 20 years, I was a rabbi, and I counseled people through all of life's, what I call life's T's: transitions, tests, trials, traumas, tragedies, the highs, mostly the lows. And during that time, I went back to school, got a doctoral degree in counseling, and I love counseling. I love therapy. Um, but one of the things I was just tired of after 15, 20 years of doing this, and I left the being a rabbi to focus on this full time, is I want to help people move forward. Sometimes you do have to go backwards. You have to unpack the past. You have to deal with the traumas. But logotherapy is forward thinking therapy. So we spend a lot less time in the past and a lot more time on what Simon Sinek revived in a conversation years back called Start with Why. Have you read his book, Start with Why?
I haven't, no.
It's a great book, but it wasn't his idea. It took the business world by storm. Viktor Frankl said in the midst of the Holocaust, he who has a why to live for can endure anyhow. And if you know your why, you can endure anything. And so I work with people in finding their why, their mission, their purpose. Now I've shifted over mostly working with companies and organizations. And that's forward. That's not backwards. We shouldn't discount the past, but we also shouldn't be stuck in it. And so really, I guess the big shift for me is I think of it as driving a car. You spend most of the time looking through the windshield, not the rear view mirror, if you don't want to crash. And so I help people kind of look forward through the windshield to choose where they want to go in life, as opposed to letting life choose for them.
It is interesting because I do think a lot of people are thinking about the past and like what they mistakes they've made or things that have happened and they kind of like replay it in their minds. So when someone is coming to you, how do you get someone to like kind of think in the future? Are you asking them like what are your goals? Are you getting them focused on like what they want to achieve? Or like how is that process to get them out of the past mindset?
It's a great question. So, as an example, Enneagram sevens, the enthusiasts are forward visionary. You know, you have vision means you're looking where you want to go. So,
Mhm.
I imagine it doesn't strike you as surprising when I say you're probably forward thinking, forward looking. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So I would never treat, anybody like this is how, because, you're Viktor Frankl called it, you're a defiant spirit, and that spirit can't be quantified into a number. So what I would do is I would utilize the things that I know that are true about your number to help you kind of focus on where it is that you're avoiding or what you react and where you go when you're unconscious. So sevens tend to look too far down the road and not be present. So the work of an Enneagram 7 is to be present here now, be here now.
Mhm.
Some types, Enneagram 4, the individualist Enneagram, some of the other Enneagram types are backwards looking. And that's when I help them shift forward. So I don't necessarily help everybody shift forward, but there are certain types that are more prone to getting stuck in the past. And here's what I learned as a rabbi. I did about 500 funerals before I retired. And one of the things I found was we talk too much about surviving. Now, surviving is a start, right? When we lose a loved one, when we go through any kind of trauma or tragedy, we must start with surviving. But that's only a starting point. We then have to live. Well, you can't just live if you don't have a sense of where you're going, where you want to get to, what's possible. And so what I would help people do, and now I do this, as part of my system, is I help people that's not a fair word. I help people reorient themselves towards where they want to go and not where
Mhm.
they have been or where they wish they would have gone or their loved one being alive. And so it's about articulating our vision, our purpose, our why. And that always leads us to the future. And there's always something down the road to live for if we're willing to work at it, to look at it, to live it. And I guess lastly, I would just say it's so shocking to me. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 7 companies. 6 of them
Awesome.
failed miserably. I know you're an entrepreneur too. And those that failed, 5 or 6 that failed, I didn't have the why. It just wasn't articulated, and I got distracted in too many different directions. The one that succeeded had a very clear why. And it just surprises me. I work with all these business people now who have clear why in their business. They don't have one for their personal life, right? They've never articulated a personal mission statement. And so that's part of what we do together.
I do think a lot of entrepreneurs aren't thinking a lot about themselves. They're like, how can I grow my business? What can I do in my free time that's for the business or helping that kind of excel versus working on themselves? So when you're looking at a personality quiz, let's say someone is really struggling focusing on the present, which I think is very common now, especially with social media. People are always like, what can I do? What's next? What's happening? How would you kind of get someone back in that zone? Would you kind of, are there any like, I know you sent me a quiz, but is there any like little charts that you use or certain things that people can do daily to help them kind of refocus?
Yeah, I also sent you the phase 1 of my program, just not to overwhelm you. But so in there, for instance, there are some specific tools from the Enneagram system and logotherapy of how you do that work.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody who's not going to take the Enneagram assessment and not work with me, I would say for in my experience, what I see, especially with entrepreneurs, having been one, continuing to be one, is that we confuse working with being busy, right? I mean, these like, just because we're being busy doesn't mean necessarily we're working. Certainly doesn't mean it is working. And we live in this culture where we pride ourselves on, I don't sleep, I don't stop, I'm an entrepreneur, like I'm all in the hustle, crazy busy. And I think it's garbage, right? Another teacher of mine, Wayne Dyer, said, we're not human doings, we're human beings, but I don't see that anymore. And what I have seen in very serious ways are business people, entrepreneurs who It was Lily Tomlin who said, I climbed the ladder of success to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. And I work with people at midlife who have crashed. They have more money than they know what to do with. They have not enough meaning. They've sacrificed the wrong things. I know it's easy to say, and entrepreneurs are listening right now going, yeah, but you don't know, I got bills to pay. I got to raise the next round of funding, whatever it is. And that might be true, but I have seen firsthand personally, and I'm happy to share about that, the consequences of not knowing your why, not spending time to figure it out, and not living it.
I do want to hear some of those consequences because I think people might hear this and be like, oh, okay, yeah, focus on more work-life balance or whatever. But what are the actual consequences that can happen?
Yeah.
Because I know when some people are in it and they're moving so fast, and again, they're busy 24/7, except for when they're sleeping, it's hard to think about those consequences. So yeah, go ahead and share your journey with that.
Sure. Well, real quickly, the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Strength Finders, they're all great personality tests. This one is actually thousands of years old. It's come from various traditions, but the real greatness of the Enneagram is it talks about each of the type's core fear, where we go, and it's different for each type, but where we go when we've lost our why, our purpose, where we go when we're in that crazy busy thing. And so it's different for each person. And I would start by saying that. However, what I have seen that's unique to all people is when you lose your why, your purpose, you start the process of rationalizing bad behavior. Nobody starts out evil or in hell. We just end up there in a living hell. I've counseled so many people. It's just one fudged moment, fudged lie, playing with the edges of truth, justifying bad behavior. Leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And I think that it's very important as an entrepreneur that you have some safeguards to call, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but to call out your crap, to call bullshit. When you need the people around you to call that, you need systems that you're a part of that can check that. Because otherwise we just delude ourselves into believing we are living our why when we know we've left the path. And for me, it's personal, to get pretty deep pretty quickly. My journey started when I was 15, and that's when my grandmother killed herself. She took her life. And I watched my father's reaction to it, not response, his reaction. He just went downhill. He was a successful businessman who just didn't have the tools or seek out the guidance to navigate this proactively. And I watched over the next 20 years, my beloved father fall apart, and ultimately he killed himself. And he had everything. He had money in the bank. He had a beautiful wife. He had, I'd like to think, great kids. He had everything that most of the entrepreneurs listening are striving to get. But just because you got them doesn't mean you can truly receive them. I don't care how many decimals you have on the screen. If you haven't done the inner work, you'll feel broke. I have worked with people who are worth tens of millions of dollars, and it's never enough if that's the goal. There's nothing wrong with making a lot of money, but you've got to come back to your why. And that's where I say that is the most important thing. That is why we must start with why. We must know our why. We must hold true to our why. We must have people around us that demand that we are accountable to our why, because as an entrepreneur, it's too easy to lose your why.
I totally agree with that. And I like that you said response versus reaction, because those are very two different things. And I think even for like young entrepreneurs, they're like, my why is to build this massive business and then I can buy these things and material items and all those things. But what are some whys that you commonly hear that can help people break away from like just focusing on material and money and success in business? Like, what are some other whys in order for people to get away from that and start living a little bit more positively and more meaningful lives?
So one of the greatest tragedies I had ever seen is a pattern, and it happened over and over again. And I would, as a rabbi, I would counsel, I would be a part of somebody's life as they're building their business, they sell their business, they hit that 60, 70 spot. They then go down to Florida and they begin they were super uber powerful and successful. And they go to Florida and they begin the very quick process of dying. Because
in Florida,
nothing against Florida, nothing against Florida, but it's a destination for people who have made it, right?
Okay.
for the people I was working with out of Boston. I was in Boston. And so that would just be an obvious place you go. It could be Arizona, but often it was Florida. And they would go, and what would they do? They would replace their business, their purpose. They were needed. They had hundreds of employees with a little club and a little ball and a hole in the ground, and they'd walk around hitting a ball into a hole and going out to dinner and rinse and repeat. Nothing
Uh-huh.
wrong with vacation and with recreation, but that's not a why. And you can't go from this is my why to it's gone, right? It's over. But that wasn't their why. That was their how. It should have been their how and their what. It became their why.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've worked with successful people who have done the same thing, but they go down to Florida and they're still engaged. Maybe they're playing golf, but they're also doing 10 other things because their why was never to build the company. That was a what, that was a how. Their why was to provide for, at the deepest level, their family. Well, it wasn't just money because, I spoke to somebody, pretty serious situation. They're dying and they said they wanted to opt out early and spare their family the suffering of watching them slowly degenerate. And we got back to their why. And we talked about it. They said their why is to inspire their children and their grandchildren. So now we're helping this person die in a way that is inspirational. He's not leaving early. He's going to show them. How else are we supposed to learn how to navigate life if not for our parents and our grandparents, the people who come before us? This is a successful business person who's just shifted the why of why he built his empire to now why he's going to die with dignity and purpose to inspire his children and grandchildren. Well, the how has changed, the what has changed, but the why is still the same. And it's got to be bigger than the circumstances. And that's the key.
Interesting. So do you ever tell people to put on a sheet of paper, like how, why, what? Like you kind of put little bullet points next to each one and figure out each individual section.
Not only, yes, and not only that, but to memorize it,
Mm-hmm.
to recite it like it is a religious, document to you, because it is every day. I have mine. It's about 3 paragraphs. I won't bore you. I recite it every single day. It's going on my tombstone. I've even thought about tattooing it on my back. It is my driver in this lifetime. I've thought about, I was reading Tuesdays with Morrie. Did you ever read Tuesdays with Morrie?
I haven't. I got to catch up on these things.
It's a good book. It's an old book, but it was about a man who was dying of ALS and just so inspiring. Anyways, ALS is a disease that takes your ability to move, but not to think. And I thought, what would I do if I just was condemned to my body, but I could still think? I want my why. I want to just reiterate my why over and over. I want that. That's my go-to in this lifetime. So yes, to articulate your why, not in some abstract way, but in a very practical way. What's your why? And also what's the what, the content, and how you're going to deliver it, bullet by bullet. It's got to be short enough that you can memorize it, but long enough that it's not just platitudes. And so, yeah, that's some of the work I do with individuals and companies.
And it seems like a lot of the whys are centered around service and helping people and just being, helpful in the community or to anyone that you can. And that can come in a lot of different forms. There's a ton of ways to help people. But do you find that that's kind of the most common thing that you see when people are talking about their why?
Yeah, one of the mistakes we made was to buy into Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Physical, emotional, but you get to the top. You remember what the top is? It's self-actualization. It's the highest version of you. Problem is, it's still you. And what Frankl said was, out of the Holocaust, we need to go to that next place beyond it, and it's self-transcendence. And we can do that. And when we do that, you've seen it in your life. I've seen it 1,000 times. When we get past ourselves, things just start to take shape. They start to get back into a flow. Oftentimes we're so hyper focused on ourselves that we're the problem. We have to get out of the way. We have to give. And, that begins with other. So of those 500 funerals I've done, the most inspiring ones all come back to he gave, she gave, and then you fill in the blank of 1,000 ways. And it's not just writing a check. Like, she was there. My mom was there after school, baking cookies every single day, or whatever the thing was. It always came down to that self-transcendence quality.
It's super interesting. And I like that you've done all these things so you're able to really see kind of the similarities between each one. And when it comes to kind of like finding your purpose, finding your why, I hear a lot about people going on these like solo trips or these like, retreats or whatever. Do you think that that actually helps in finding your purpose and, getting in tune with yourself?
No, I think it's a
No.
drug. I think it's
Okay.
a drug of choice. I think it just reinforces me. I think the best thing you can do, honestly, if you're an entrepreneur, is commit to one other person. I call it marriage, call it whatever you want. Have children, build a friendship, build a community, go to your church, your synagogue, your mosque, your Zen center, yoga. I go to the yoga studio. Do whatever you want. I know you're a big fan of yoga. Participate in the world. There's enough of you, right? You have all you need. You need to, like you said, Annie, you need to transcend yourself, give back, be a part of something bigger, because that's the biggest fear I have for entrepreneurs is they become self-absorbed. They think they're selfless. They think they're giving it away, but it's just me, building mine, building ours. And it's got to be something bigger than that. It just does.
And I think in today's day and age, especially, people are very focused on their lives, their family lives, no one else's. So I think,
It's
learning to
understandable.
work together. Yeah. Cause
It's
I'm seeing that,
understandable.
I'm seeing that a lot. I mean, maybe it was always like that a little bit, but now more than ever, I don't know what it is, but people are just more focused on just them, their family, no one else around
So I
them.
counsel a lot of sort of younger entrepreneurs, and we talk about everything because I don't believe that there's work. There's not. That's why I use the Enneagram. It's a circle. You can't have half a circle. A circle is a circle. Like you can't have here's my work self and here's my home self, and they're different things. That's how we get into trouble. We start compartmentalizing our lives. We become fragmented, broken. We need to get back to this whole. And how you are at work, it's going to impact how you are at home and vice versa. So we talk about everything. And one of the things we talk about is a lot about sex. I'm like somehow become like this, sex rabbi guru mentor, teaching them about having better sex. Because here's what I hear over and over. It's just not satisfying. I'm not finding what I want in that other person. And what's the answer? Change persons, change partners, go wide. And my response to always is go deep. Stand where you are, commit to that person. I am not saying sex out of marriage is the issue. I could care less about the morality thing. What I care about is you, as Frankel calls it, make your stand, go all in. The other person across from you in that relationship knows when you're 98%. Then they give 97 and 6, 100%. Go all in like you would with your business. How would you expect to get more back from a relationship than you would from your company if you're half in? And so, we talk a lot about committing to the person, committing to the why, committing to commitment, responsibility. And I really think people are hungry for that message because I don't think we're getting it out in the world.
No, I do agree. And it's the same with like working out and work. Like you mentioned, your career is like a lot of people will try, they think they're going all in, but it's really like 60% effort. And then they're like, oh, this isn't working. So I'm going to move on to the next thing.
Totally.
And that's everyone. And that's why no one really gets the results they want. And especially I can relate it to working out a lot because it happens all the time. So I like what you said with going all in, and it's maybe look at it from a different perspective and go deeper instead of kind of moving on too quickly.
And, we live in a world where there's too much distraction. There's too many choices. You cannot be a master of everything, right? You must choose where are you going to put your attention, your focus, and go all in. I mean, the challenge is, if you're an entrepreneur, what they just heard was, okay, I am come full circle. I'm all into my business. And that's when I come back to the why. I've never met anybody who at the end of the day says my why really was my company. And if they want to challenge me, I'll say, okay, I bet it doesn't come up at your eulogy, right? It might come up of the how and the what. You built an empire. Why? Right? So
Yes.
be all in on that and, translate it into the hows and the whats as they come along.
Yeah. And that's why I like when people have this huge positive message behind their business. So they're still building their business, but there is a why within the business. Like there's something that they're doing for someone else or something that's coming from that business that's really helpful. And so I think you can have both, which I think is really cool when people are creating their own businesses.
You just have to work your ass off to make sure you have both.
Mm-hmm.
And working your ass off and, putting in 20-hour days isn't the point.
Mm-hmm.
right? You also have to do your inner work. You have to get past yourself and give back, self-transcend. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot easier to just go to work in some ways.
Mm-hmm. And go through the motions, autopilot. That's what
Go through
most
the
people
motion.
experience. Yeah.
And, then you end up somewhere 10, 20 years down the road talking to me saying, I don't know how I got here. My wife, my partner left me. My kids won't talk to me. I have money and that's checked, but I'm missing some other fundamentals.
No,
Don't wait.
it is sad. And I think it's important for people to hear before they get themselves too far down the road of ignoring everything else except for themselves and their business.
And we need, that's why I turned to the Enneagram. We need systems. We're a little arrogant, all of us, in that we've been dropped off on a rock in outer space that's swirling around a hot ball of fire that we're waiting to die. Like, this thing is fucking scary. And we're all supposed to make it up individually. And I have what it takes to do that. I got to turn to those who came before me, where it's easy to look down on a giant when you're standing on her shoulders. Like, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. That's why I turned to Frankel. Like, he did this in the Holocaust, right? And he came out and he said, surviving is not enough. We must thrive. And we always have the power to choose our response. He said this as his wife was murdered. His unborn child was murdered. His parents were murdered. His brother was murdered. His family was murdered. Everything was stripped from him. He had his name replaced with a number, 119104. That's what the Nazis referred to him as. And as he said, he was never a number because he always had the defiant power of spirit and he was free. And so, we need to turn to these great wisdom teachers and traditions to learn from them. So that A, we can have best practice. If you're a business person, best practice. And B, so we don't feel so damn alone, because you're not.
Mm-hmm. No, it's so true. And I think that's another common thing is like depression, because people are feeling alone, and it's just something that everyone's experiencing. So I like what the message that you're giving off with going deeper and kind of figuring out the why behind yourself and what your life is actually about. And I think it will help a lot of people with whatever they're going through. So I appreciate it. And can anyone take this Enneagram test on your website?
Yeah, there's a lot of free ones out there, and
Mm-hmm.
in life you get what you pay for. You could probably go find a free trainer, for a while, but they're not quality like you.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to invest in a good one. There's a handful of good ones. I use one for business people. It's not cheap, it's expensive, but it's worth the investment. But you can either take a free one or take an expensive one. And at the end of the day, nobody is here to tell you what your Enneagram number is, your type. You have to decide. When I work with people, it's not about taking away their power and saying, okay, here, you're an Enneagram 7. Here's who you are. I'm putting you in a box. Like, I would never do that to somebody. It's about taking back your power to see where you've ended up as a number, where you've ended up in a box, and how do you get out of this box? And so that's where I think the Enneagram is a profound system, showing you how to get out of the box.
I love that. All right. So tell them where they can find you, your website, everything like that.
Sure. Defiantspirit.org, defiantspirit.org. And you'll find everything you need to get going on the journey of what I call defying your number, the Defy Your Number Enneagram system.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'll make sure I insert all of your info below.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks so much.